Welcome to the Morse Code Podcast, where we have conversations with entrepreneurially minded creatives in music, film, and writing. My name is Korby, and our goal here is to inspire you to push deeper into your own work, whether you're a full-time professional or just curious about what it's actually like to live as an indie creative. This week's episode is brought to you by the Nashville chapter of the 48 Hour Film Festival, an annual film competition in which teams of filmmakers have 48 hours to create a short film from scratch. Be on the lookout for the 2024 edition coming next summer. I'm really excited to bring to you this conversation with my new friend and longtime personal hero, Adam Levy, a guitarist, songwriter, and band leader most famous for his collaborations with Norah and Tracy Chapman. Adam's tasty playing is all over Norah's best-selling albums, including Come Away With Me and Feels Like Home. I bumped into him recently at Guthrie Trapp's standing gig on Monday nights here in East Nashville at a great little club called The Underdog. Adam sat in on a few songs with Guthrie and proceeded to light up the room with his unusual combination of finesse and what I might call joy on fire. We talk about all kinds of stuff, from his early influence as the grandson of George Wyle, an arranger and composer in the 50s and 60s, most famous for composing the theme song to Gilligan's Island, to combining a somewhat formal music education with his own personal exploration, a journey which eventually led to his collaborations with Tracy Chapman. We also talk about our shared admiration for guitarist and composer Bill Frisell, as well as Adam's take on learning how to combat stage fright through remembering an episode of Mr. Rogers. Finally, Adam plays 2 songs live in the studio. Check out his brand new record, Spry, and if that's not enough, he released a book last month called String Theories. So let's get into it already. My conversation with Adam Levy. Man, thank you so much for making a little time for me here. And you're a busy guy and you're only in town for a few days.
Yeah.
So thank you in advance, I guess, for whatever's about to happen. Who knows? And this, I guess I could say that this happened because thanks to Guthrie Trapp, our now mutual friend, who has a standing gig at the Underground in East Nashville. And I didn't have any idea that you were going to be there, but there you were. And taking chances and making it happen as per usual. And Kyle and I were sitting in the audience just like so delighted. And I was nervous to talk to you because we'd never really met. But you were so gracious and nice. And now here you are. And what good fortune.
Oh, right
so,
on.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
And maybe how did you get in touch with Guthrie, or how did that even happen? Was it just like you knew of him, you reached out, or he reached out, or?
Yeah. How did that happen?
I mean, he's kind of a known, that gig is probably a known quantity in the, if you're in town, swing by.
For sure. He came through New York about 2 months ago. He was playing a show with Oz Noy at the bitter end. And honestly, I can't remember the initial thing of how like we got each other's digits or whatever. But I do, when we were talking about trying to connect in New York, I knew I had this trip coming up. And while he was in New York, we just kept missing each other. I couldn't make it to his gig at the bitter end. And then we were trying to get together for a coffee. And it was a bunch of messages back and forth. And we were both too busy that week. So I said, hey, man, I'm coming down to Nashville. Maybe we could play. And he said, yeah, I've got this Monday night gig. Just come on by. And since I didn't know him that well, I didn't know if that meant like, come
see me.
Yeah. Or if that meant, come early, set up, sound check. I really didn't know what that meant.
Yeah. Well, it turned out it meant sit in and see what happens.
Well, yeah, we got a little more focused as it came closer.
Yeah, because you were playing, I mean, some of those arrangements are a little bandy, and you were right in there. So was there a little bit of a rehearsal or just like a chart? Or just big ears?
Well, I'd love to say I just have big ears, but really it's a combination of, I do have big ears. I also have like OCD and anxiety. And when I wrote to Guthrie like a week out, like, hey man, are there some songs I should learn? Are there tunes? Is there like a SoundCloud link or a record or anything? And he's like, oh man, it's everything is just 2 chords, just come down. So I go on YouTube and I find that there's these couple of live streams that he did in June from the Underdog with that band. Now, that was June. This is already the end of August. I don't know if the tunes in that live stream are tunes that he plays all the time, or if those were like just the tunes in June. But I thought, okay, let me try to learn those tunes, and then if those are the one, if he calls even one of them, I'm a little bit ahead of just like starting from scratch. So, I mean, that's like really an anxiety dream for me, is like being on stage and having no idea what's going on. So Guthrie is, I think, more of like, well, just go for it and it'll be cool. And there's a part of me that's like that too. Yeah.
That's really interesting because because from where we were, you were in there going for it. And I was thinking, and one always maybe, or if one is me, I'm always like looking at other players and be like, oh, I can totally relate to that. Or I'm like, that is what I wish I could do. Or, like I've done this for a long enough time that I'm sort of aware of what I might be good at and what I definitely know I'm not. And not the best improviser in the world. And for what, I can do it, but it's like, I take your anxiety and find it more paralyzing than empowering. And you in that moment, at least, have the fortitude to just charge ahead into the unknown and see what happens and, stick the landings. So whatever your apprehension was, you still kind of, if nothing else, fake it until, fake it well enough that it's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I say, when I talk about like, this stuff, I don't share it to be self-indulgent, but just in the hopes that somebody else might go like, oh, I feel that way sometimes, or I recognize that. And, maybe not think of it as some insurmountable thing, but just part of the human experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I took a look at your bio, and I mean, I've known of you and seen your playing even live, like in LA, here and there across, and you're absolutely a known and widely loved artist in our little neck of the music woods. You've ventured in many necks, and maybe we could start with just a little bit of background. I know that you grew up in LA. Your granddad, George, was really involved in music for television and film, and so consequently, you were around sort of like the American songbook as a little kid. Am I right?
Mostly right. He didn't work in film, but he worked in television. He worked in variety shows. There was a singer named Andy Williams, and my grandfather was the musical director on his show. And Andy was a singer and also would regularly have guests on who were singers. So my grandfather quite often was having to like write arrangements for like a sort of a miniature big band for people to, for Andy to sing or for a guest, or sometimes there was he wrote a lot of duets. And so things would change keys to accommodate 2 different singers trying to sing the same song, or he was really good at figuring out like, oh, this Irving Berlin song, actually you can sandwich it together with this George Gershwin song, and they make a kind of a medley together. So to him, that was what we now call the Great American Songbook, was just kind of pop for him from his generation. He was born in 1916. So when he was working in television in the 60s and in radio before that, these songs from the 30s and 40s, as I said, Irving Berlin and Gershwin and Rodgers and Hart, he didn't think of them as just vehicles for jazz improvisation, which is what some people who discover that music, that's how they think, because they learn it through a Miles Davis record or something.
Sure.
But to him, like, that was what was on the radio when he was a young person. And so it's just, now that I think of it, it's just wild that like for a generation that was just simply pop. You know, that wasn't thought of as high art or anything like that.
Yeah. And so you were, if he was, I'm like doing the math. So when it was in TV, when he was in TV, he was like 40s or 50s even then. So you may or may not have been around, or did you kind of get this hearsay from your folks? Like granddad really knew his stuff. Or?
Well, no, both. I mean, so we were 50 years apart. He was born in 1916 and I was born in 1966. He did very, very well and could have retired at 60 comfortably, but he wanted to keep working for two reasons. One is it's just he loved it. He loved music. He loved the people that he worked with. He loved show business. He loved everything about it. You know, he worked a lot at NBC Studios in Burbank. He worked on a handful of different TV shows that happened there. And then later in life, like when I started playing guitar with artists who would be on, you know, guests on late night shows or whatever, for me to go back into that place always just really brought back really good feelings of remembering with my grandfather. But no, he used to...
Some of these are the same studios as you had been to as a little kid.
So he stayed in it for two reasons. One is he loved it just genuinely. Like even when he finally did retire, he still first thing in the morning had a cup of coffee and went straight to the piano. Like he never stopped making music. But he also stayed in it longer than he needed to because he wanted to hand me the torch. So when he was 70 and I was 20, I was finally mature enough to, you know, not make, you know, an ass of myself around, you know, grown-up studio people. And I joined the union and he hired me for a session. And that was the last working day. Like a couple days later, he said, yeah, I'm done now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like he got to the goal.
Yeah.
It's just like the next generation.
Yeah.
So you guys were tight then when you were a kid coming up.
Oh, yeah. My parents split up when I was a kid. And so I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house because they were kind of helping take care of me while my mom was working. And so, yeah, I was very close. This is my mother's parents, yeah.
So that you can see now the influence must have been almost organic, being just physically in the spaces where your grandpa was.
Right. He never sat me down and said, let me show you how music works. It was never like that. But I spent a lot of time in his house and a lot of time with him at work.
And do you think that has informed your approach to developing as a player in the sense that, you know, some players are studiers, you know, they get in there and they like learn the Stevie Ray Vaughan songbook or, you know, the licks and then use those as building blocks, and others sort of go through it via osmosis. And does one of those two approaches speak to you more? Or
no, they're really equal to me. And I have this silly image of it, which is maybe the wrong image, but did you ever see this movie Night of the Hunter?
No.
It's a
I like the title, though.
Yeah, it's this incredible movie with Robert Mitchum, where he's sort of a bad preacher man. And he has tattooed on one set of knuckles love, and hate is on the other one. And he's explaining to these kids how, you know, love, and it's a battle for love and hate. And that's not at all what you're asking, but, you know, am I...
well, it gets at that sort of like dualistic approach to life that you can find everywhere.
Right.
You know, these inherent contradictions that somehow you have to hold on to at the same time.
Yeah.
As you make your way forward.
Yeah.
So. And
that's where I feel like I am a studier. Like, when I was in high school, I took a class on writing 4-part chorales, like Bach style. So I learned all the rules of that, and I loved it. And then I got to study with this guy, Ted Green, who was a kind of a legendary guitar teacher in LA and player, but more as a teacher. And then I went to music school. Right out of high school, I went to this music school in LA. So I was very educated in a formal way, but also, when I was a kid, there was no YouTube, but I would study songbooks. My grandfather, because of what he had done professionally, had file cabinets in his garage just full of,
I can only imagine, arrangements upon arrangements.
Yeah. And songbooks, because when he worked in television, I was saying a minute ago how, his heroes were Irving Berlin and stuff, but if you're the musical director of a TV show that's happening in 1972, you need to know about the Beatles, you need to know about Joni Mitchell, you need to know about Crosby, Stills, and Nash, because those people might be a guest on the show, and maybe you've got to write an arrangement for something like that. So he just had loads and loads of songbooks, and it was like a lending library. I could take them out. I couldn't keep them. He had this index card
logbook or checkout.
Yeah. Well,
due dates.
Yeah. So, but I would borrow them and kind of take them apart. And I mean, not take the books apart, but take the songs apart. Why does C sound good when it goes to A minor? Why does C sound a little different when it goes to F minor or to D minor or when it doesn't go anywhere and just hangs out on C for 8 bars? I try to figure that stuff out, and then I would listen to records. And so I was very curious and self-directed, but also I did go to formal music school.
I really can relate to that in that I didn't have any formal music training, but I was as a child very interested in it. I was always out there and wanted the solo and the core. I had a high school band we were serious. We made money touring around rural Idaho. It was pretty glamorous. But when I went to college, that my first year in music theory freshman, it was like a light exploded where, it was like, oh, that's why, the whole concept of tonicizing, a 5/5, how chords are related. And then once you know how they're related, how there's so much power in being able to manipulate them.
Yeah.
And I was that was a driving force in my musical exploration for several years until I was like, you know what? I kind of like it a little, as soon as it gets real heady, then I get heady. And I'm I kind of like to live in an emotional space. And now I'm back to 1/4/5 songs. But anyway, it's so exciting to go hear something interesting in a song and go, is that a major 3? Is that, it's a 3 going to the 4 instead of the resolving to the 6 minor, which is what you think you normally do. And,
right.
You also see once these things that were kind of curious that grabbed your attention, in time, you start to recognize them in many places, and you realize, oh, these are all tropes. They're kind of reused and recycled. 3-6-2-5-1 is everywhere. But so I can share your enthusiasm, but there's so much power that comes with that.
Yeah.
Whether or not you choose to use it or anything. So how did you? Let's see. I'm getting ahead of myself. You went from LA to San Francisco. You wrote for, among other things, the Guitar Player magazine that was in that little space. Yeah. And you were Bill Frisell acolyte, is it fair to say? Yeah. And you can still hear that in your playing. Yeah, sure. And I'm such a huge fan. He was a guy that pulled me out of my austere acoustic. I only cared about bluegrass and old time and anything for out of college. And I came across, I don't even know why. It's embarrassing to say that now because I didn't grow up that way. I was like a fish junkie. And then, but I listened to David Grisman's Hot Dog record. And for a minute there, and by a minute, I mean about 6 years, all I wanted to do was learn how to play like Tony Rice. Didn't happen, but not for lack of trying. And but somewhere out of that, there was 2 things that happened, and one of them was the Pizza Tapes record with Grisman. And what was the turning point for me was that it was Grisman, Rice, and Jerry Garcia. Yeah. And hearing Tony and Jerry back to back, I was like, oh, I like it so much more with the space, and And that was like a gateway to all things Jerry, and like the humility that he brings to the music, the heart, and the intelligence, the mind, the fearlessness, but also the not the most choppiness of chops. And that idea of like working within limits was so attractive to me. But what I wanted to say was the other record that was really important to me was, I think it was Ghost Town of Bill Frisell's, where it was like a lot of acoustic. I think that might have been the one he did with the banjo picker Danny Barnes, and I think it was actually the one before, but they were very similar sounding records. But one of them was like a lot of acoustic music, and then it was his electric guitar playing, and I was just like, it's so interesting what he's doing. That's such high art, and it was the end of like acoustic music only for me. Anyway, you're a Bill Frisell acolyte, and did you like? Were you guys in the same town, or?
No, we weren't in the same town. A lot of the time, the record, like in the 90s when he was making a lot of these records and into early 2000s, he was in Seattle. Before that, he had been, I think, in New York or maybe New Jersey. But yeah, he was on the New York scene for a while and then moved, and then he was in Seattle. But the reason I got to know him was kind of twofold. One is in '89, I was living in LA. I was 23 years old, and a friend of mine called me at the last minute and asked, like, "Hey, what are you doing, like, now?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. What am I doing now?" And he's like, "Well, I have tickets to see Bill Frisell at this. There was a place in Santa Monica called At My Place. I don't think it's there anymore, but in '89, that was a spot where you'd go to hear music." And I'd only read about him in Guitar Player magazine. This is 1989. He's not like in the culture in the way that maybe he is now. But I mean, he was in Guitar.
It's like before the MacArthur grants and whatnot. Yeah.
But I went to see him, and it completely blew my mind. And I was like, "That's what I want to do." I remember when I. In the years that I worked at Guitar Player magazine, which is a little bit before this, so this is like 97, 98. Sorry. It's after what I just said, but before what I'm about to say. I interviewed Hubert Sumlin, who was this incredible blues guitar player that played on almost all the Howlin' Wolf records. And I asked him, like, "How did you get started?" And he said, "Man, one day when I was a kid, I found an old, warped Charlie Patton record in a garbage can. And I pulled it out and I took it home and I put it on the record player. And I heard it and I said, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do." And when I heard Bill play in LA or in Santa Monica in '89, it was really clear because, like, think of the context. I grew up in Los Angeles in the 80s at sort of peak shred.
Yeah.
MTV videos, all the hair metal bands.
Slash.
Right.
Ruled the town.
Slash ruled the town.
Yeah.
And even in like the jazz fusion thing, which was pretty big in LA, you had a guy named Frank Gambale, a guy named Scott Henderson. So like in jazz, there were guys playing solid body guitars and shredding. You turn on the radio and, you could hear anything from, Eddie Van Halen to Slash. I grew up in that time. And then to hear Bill play in 1989 with his quartet and be going in such a different direction, it got to me. Got to my heart.
So bold in that context, right? I mean, he just is like going this complete different direction.
Yeah.
Not a jazz cat straight up, but not glam rock.
Yeah.
It's a Frisell thing.
Yeah. And then, after that, I moved to the Bay Area, as you said. I was living in Berkeley for a little while. And through a mutual friend, I got to meet Bill's manager. He's managed by a couple, really. There's a guy named Lee Townsend, whose name shows up on a bunch of Bill's records as a producer. and Lee's wife, her name is Phyllis Oyama, and I got to meet them through a mutual friend, and so that's how I got to know Bill. Was that because the two people I just mentioned, Lee and Phyllis, they live in Berkeley. I'd see them socially, you know, and when Bill would come through town, you know, we'd meet up. He put out a songbook in the late '90s. He published all the songs he had written up till that point, when of course he's written hundreds more since then. But I wrote a little foreword for that book. I interviewed him for Guitar Player magazine when the Ghost Town record came out. So we've known each other for something like 30 years, I guess. Never actually played together, but you know, now where I live in Brooklyn, we're kind of neighbors. And you know,
you're young yet. I think there's time. And so there's kind of a full circle moment too, because the new record that's coming out has Joey Barron on it, and he's a longtime Bill collaborator. I think that was, in fact, there was a live recording that he did. I want to say as late '80s, early '90s. Maybe it was in Europe somewhere, but he does a cover of "Have a Little Faith in Me," and I think Barron's playing drums on that. And like that was one of my. I was just like, oh my God, because it was improv on improv. I mean, just course after course after course, after, like 8 times through, and it kept going. And then it was like huge without being loud. And that was, for me as a kid, the first time I ever was in the presence of that. Even when I was on a record, I was like, it's so big, and it's the same exact volume as it was at the beginning. And that was like a glimpse of mastery that I had not encountered prior. You know?
Yeah. You know, I saw Bill at the Village Vanguard. And also, thank you for bringing up my new record, which I'm glad to circle back to, but I'm just going to share this little anecdote because I think it's funny to me. I saw Bill play at the Village Vanguard about 3 weeks ago, and he was doing this thing called Five, which is himself and 2 bass players and 2 drummers, basically taking the 2 trios that he has played with post his band with Joey Barron. So he's had a long-standing trio with Tony Scher on bass and Kenny Wollesen on drums. And then he's had another trio with Thomas Morgan and Rudy Royston. So he had the idea to, let's just all play. And on the face of it, you might think, isn't that going to be, first of all, really loud?
A little much.
Perhaps. Like, yeah. But it wasn't, of course, because everybody's, you know, a musician and an artist, and they love each other. And so I saw this show, and I saw the last show of his week-long run. So he was there Tuesday to Sunday, 2 nights a week. And I saw the late set Sunday night. So he's been playing this music with this group. This is the 12th show in 6 days. It was the thing you were saying about how it got really big, but it wasn't necessarily loud. Like, you don't need earplugs at a Bill Frisell show, even when there's 2 drummers. But this young, sweet, I was talking with Bill after the show, and this young kid, I say kid, I mean, I don't know. He might have been 25. The kid, to me, came up to Bill, and he's like, man, I really wanted to meet you, and I wanted to just thank you for being so vulnerable. And I knew what he meant, because it does take a kind of vulnerability to do that. But at the same time, I felt like it wasn't quite the right word, because, I mean, in his way, Bill is such a baller. It's just like, it's so powerful. And yes, there is a vulnerability in what he does, but I was kind of like, is that really the word? I'm not sure that's the word.
You pulled him aside. Young man.
Listen.
Know who you're talking about. There's a lot of adjectives in the English language.
Yeah, exactly. So I walked him across the street, and I bought him a thesaurus, and I said, hey, you know, good luck. And
you're here. I wondered, would you mind playing a song?
Not at all.
Let's get this going for that.
This is our house, 3 little rooms. It ain't too bad when the flowers are in bloom. Don't get much sun, don't get much shade. This is our house, we got it made. This is our child, the apple from our tree. She looks like you, she talks like me. Someday she'll lead the band in a honky-tonk parade. This is our family, we've got it made. As we fumble through the dark, our love will be the spark. Trouble may rise, but it's bound to fall away. This is our song, and now it's played. I've told the story true, I haven't strayed. There are no riches for which I'd trade. This is our house, we've got it made. This is our house, we've got it made. This is our house, we've got it made.
So you've also played on some really big records that everybody knows. And that's, let's spend a moment there if you could indulge me. But most of the works that like my wife will freak out about are like the stuff that you did with Tracy Chapman and Norah Jones. Mm-hmm. And maybe we can talk for a second about how did you get involved with Tracy first? Am I right?
Yeah. A mutual friend, a guitar player named Charlie Hunter, knew Tracy and knew that she was looking for a guitar player and recommended me. Mm-hmm. And so I auditioned. It was the first formal audition that I ever did.
And how old were you when you got that gig?
30.
Okay. So you've been kicking around for a minute.
Yeah.
And was that you toured with her and then played on studio records or vice versa?
I played on a record that's called New Beginning that had a single called, the single was Give Me One Reason.
Oh, yeah, the song.
Yeah, and so the record that song comes from is called New Beginning. There's a sunflower on the cover, and that's the one record that I played on with Tracy. And
did you do the studio first and then tour, or did it kind of all come out of the touring? Just curious. No. Chicken before egg, or
that gig was very. Yeah, the chicken and the egg on that gig was very unusual, at least in my experience. I started playing with Tracy. I got the audition and I was hired, and they said, we're going to rehearse for a few weeks and then we're going to make a new record, and then we're going to go out on the road. I said, that sounds great.
Yeah.
And I was on retainer. Like I got like, whoa, okay, cool.
This is what it's like.
This is what it's like. And we were rehearsing like 5 days a week. So I thought, okay, well, 5 days a week, in a few weeks we should have this all sorted out. Then they decided I say they. I don't know if it was coming from Tracy or from management, but let's say Tracy decided, I want the band to know all of my catalog. And she had already made 3 records at that point. She had 3 records out. So I was like, okay, well, we'll learn 40 songs or whatever that is. Cool. And so we had to kind of get those together before she would start showing us the new songs. So 3 weeks turned into like 6 weeks, and then she was kind of particular about parts and tones, and not in a bad way, but just like, hey, go back and listen to that in the second verse. This thing happened. That you're not doing the thing that makes that work. And we're learning vocal harmony sometimes, and so then it was like 12 weeks went by, and then it was like, wow, maybe this won't end. I started to wonder, and then after about 6 months, we actually did go out and do a little tour before we recorded, because Tracy knew that like all the rehearsing you can do, when you actually take a band out on the road, that's when it gets together. Yeah. Really. That's how you get a band together. We played some very low-key shows. I couldn't even tell you where we played. None of it was recorded. I've Googled to try to find out where we played. Or there's like no footprint. It was
like
just
around LA or?
No. Well, this was all happening. No, this was happening in the Bay Area.
Okay.
She lived somewhere up there. And we were rehearsing, the rehearsal space was in Oakland. And, the gigs were like, we did a show in Kansas. They were like mostly like college gigs at colleges, not even theaters, but just really low key. They weren't promoted. They were just places where people would be anyway. It was kind of, because it wasn't meant to draw her fans. It was really meant to just get the band
tighter, gelling.
And then we went in and recorded the album, which was maybe like a week or 10 days of recording. And then I left the band before the big tour, so I am not in the MTV video. The guitarist that followed me, her name is Linda Taylor. She plays guitar in the video, playing my parts. And
so somewhere in there you made the record. So you went out and did the shows and then came back and made the record. And then you went off to do other things after that. Must have been funny. I always wonder about how it is for musicians who learn the parts of other musicians from records. I mean, you probably have done it a bazillion times.
I've done it a zillion times. I learned all the parts on the first record, which was mostly a guy from Memphis. I can't remember his name now because I'm bad with names, but Jack something. And then I learned all the parts from her second record, which is a different guitar player, and all the parts from her third record. And I that's what you do. But a funny thing is, I recently had to relearn some of my own parts. An artist that I play with now, her name is Liz Wright, and we recorded her in February. Yeah, you should check her out. Check her out. LIZZWRIGHT.
I think I've seen her around. LA, you said?
She's in Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And we just shot a music video for the single for her next record, which will come out probably in spring. And in order to shoot the music video, since they were going to have multiple cameras, I knew they were going to zoom in. I have a guitar solo. So I had to relearn my guitar solo note for note, which was a funny feeling to me.
Because of the camera.
Because the camera.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because we were playing to the track. Like, it's... So I had to play basically the exact thing I played.
Yeah, not that ever stops music or video people from... They don't really notice that the fingers aren't hitting the frets exactly, but the musicians are like,
I knew it was possible that I would do all the work of relearning my solo perfectly, and then that in the final edit it could look ridiculous.
A different take. Yeah. They're like, it looks. I like this facial expression right there.
Like, I get that. I mean, The people that make videos are filmmakers. But anyway, so I have some idea. It was kind of a funny thing to have to, like, you were saying, like, learn parts off records. I had to learn my own parts off of a record, and that was kind of funny.
So let's talk about the new record.
Okay.
It comes out, well, this is going to air in a couple of months, so it probably just came out.
Yeah.
And from what I read about it, it was the approach to recording it was like everybody in the same room, largely at the same time, minimal isolation. And that was a choice of desire or necessity, or both, or neither.
Desire, really, that came from Joey Barron, the drummer. We showed up at the studio. They had we could have been fully isolated, no problem. Lots of people probably make records in that studio and isolate everything. But Joey walked in and he looked around and he's like, man, it would really be great if we could just be in the same room together, not use headphones. Because this is a band that's not a well-oiled machine. Me and Larry Grenadier and Joey Barron didn't have a 6-month lockout at a studio in Oakland and then 10 days on the road.
Does anyone anymore?
No, they do not. I wrote this music. I made little, like, home demos of the music, just playing my acoustic guitar with a metronome, sent them to those guys, made charts, and I said, this is the music. We won't have a rehearsal. We're just going to go to the studio and start recording. And I think in Joey's mind, because we weren't a well-oiled band that's like, oh, I don't need to see these guys. I know what they're going to play. We didn't know that at all. This music had never been played. Those two guys had played together. I had played with every possible duo in that trio had played together at some time, but we'd never all played together. So Joey said the best result we're going to get musically is if we can see each other and hear each other. So we set up pretty close together. Played very quietly, listened to each other, no headphones. And a little sacrifice was made in when you have to mix it, that there's bleed.
Sure.
It is what it is.
That's part of the joy of it all. There's always been limits in music. It's only until very recently that there are almost none. And there's maybe a direct relationship between the humanity of a particular recording and the amount of control one has or one doesn't have.
Right.
You could make an argument. I'm not saying I'm making that argument, but so yeah, I've heard the Bandcamp tracks, the kind of pre-release tracks, and it's very musical, and you can tell it. It's a conversation style, and that's a compliment to me of any piece of music. I that's what I look for. I hope that it's being received really well. And I do want to get into this part of the conversation because you have had a decade that spanned, many decades at this point. And so you've weathered changes in industry, changes in your own life personally, the ups and the downs, the opportunity of being on the top of the mountain, and wherever. There's probably been a few valley moments. I'm just going to guess. How have you, stayed? You're also like the opposite of a jaded guy, at least from where I sit. And that's just such a wonderful quality to have maintained, throughout. And how do you think that's just, part of your basic disposition? Is it some choices you had to make? How have you stayed motivated and inspired across time?
Well, and I'm thinking actually about something you asked me earlier that is connected in the dot-osphere. We're talking about, like, when I sat in with Guthrie Trapp the other night, I was pretty nervous before we went on. My hands were clammy. I wanted to have a beer to relax, but I was also afraid if I had a beer, then I would play worse, and I didn't want to do that. So I was just like kind of really in my own head. And then I thought about Mr. Rogers, who I watched a lot of when I was a kid, like a lot. And I remembered an episode where they went to the hospital for something. I can't remember what it was. And at that time, I was just about to get my tonsils out. So I was going to have to go to the hospital for the first time.
So this was ringing true.
Yeah. And he made it like the thing that I said to you, which is like, it's just part of the human experience. If I'm a little nervous or my hands are sweaty, or if I think maybe I can't really do this, I'm about to walk out on stage with a very serious guitar player. I don't really know the songs. I'd never met his bass player before. I knew his drummer. Playing into an amplifier I've never plugged into, no sound check, just walk out on stage, plug and play. Look out in the audience, a bunch of guitar players are out there. And I'm like, oh man. But I thought about Mr. Rogers, and he made that like going to the hospital thing. He didn't try to convince kids that it was going to be fun or easy, but just that it's part of being a person, and that a lot of being a person means just like taking a step forward and believing in yourself and believing in the humanity of other people, that something good will happen,
Yeah, there's kind of a Buddhist element to that, of like noticing the feeling, and the Buddhists would say like not being attached to it, but that's a similar way of saying like this feeling is part of life. It's okay. It's welcome here too.
Yes.
It's not going to dictate what I do next, but I'm noticing it, and like that's okay. You're here.
Yeah.
There's something so empowering about that.
Yeah.
So you've managed to, and I'm going to just extrapolate from that, this idea that you've managed to, whatever particular feeling, it's like, it's okay. And you've had enough faith to take another step forward and trusting that it will continue to be okay, or a different version of okay.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's how, I'm 56 now. I'll be 57 before this year is over. When I started playing music, that seemed old to me, like I couldn't imagine what doing music in my 50s or even my 40s would have looked like when I first started doing it. But the thing that I keep coming back to is like, when I was a kid, music felt really magical. I wished I could climb inside the radio. I wished I could climb into the grooves of a record, and just be in it. And that's what it was then, because I couldn't, like I was a kid, I didn't have access to live music. I wasn't going out to clubs. So
it really was magical in a way.
Yeah.
Something other people got to do or did, or something that happened over there. Yeah.
Exactly. And I've spent a lifetime, part of a lifetime. It's not done yet. But I've spent a lot of years still just fascinated with that thing. And of course I get discouraged sometimes, or just bored, or distracted. But like, hey, there's this other thing. And I take some unexpected turns. I started writing songs when I was almost 40, after having played music already for 30 years and having zero interest in lyrics. All of a sudden, one day, I was writing songs with words. I've been an editor at a magazine. I've been the chair of a guitar department. I didn't see those things coming. Of course, I didn't stay in those places. I'm not the chair of the guitar department anymore. I'm not an editor of a guitar magazine. But I had to try those things, and I don't have any regrets any more than, if you find your life partner, you don't have to like think about other partners that you had with any regret or any bad feelings. It's like, well, just had to get here somehow, and here we are. And and then I look at somebody today like Bill, or I feel lucky because when I was a kid, all the musicians I knew were older. Like all of my grandfather's friends who I knew, those were the first musicians I ever met. Those guys were all in their 50s and 60s when I was a kid. And I've always been fortunate that older musicians were kind to me and taught me valuable lessons, not just about what notes to play, but how to carry yourself, and and now I'm sort of in between. Like most of the musicians that I know now are younger than me, and I still get to know people that are on the other side of it, like Bill or my friend Lainey Stern, who's a really incredible musician. I used to play with a guy named Bill Sims Jr. in New York, great blues musician. He was older, he passed. But it's a sweet spot to be in where maybe I get to pass on some of the things I've learned to younger people, and I can still I still have mentors, that I can turn to and ask questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. It does seem that like there's something basic to the full-time creative professional life, I think at any level of success, of being able to live with the discomfort of unpredictability. You don't get to have that, a long gig. I mean, that Tracy Chapman gig, that's so long. It's unheard of. To have there are musicians in Nashville that are on retainer for big country artists, and that they have nice houses and take their kids to school every morning unless they're called up and they got to go on tour. But for most people, that's not the reality, and it does when I was in college and trying to figure out am I going to do that? I think I am. And I had friends that were really talented, and really quickly it sort of separates those who are willing to roll with those who are not. And I was always like, well, I've got enough for a beer. My rent's paid for another month. I don't care. I want to see what happens. I didn't care.
Right.
And that is a prerequisite, I feel like, for persisting across time. Not everybody's so fortunate, obviously, but of those even who are very talented, it's not a foregone conclusion that you'll be able to just hang with not knowing where your money's coming from next week, next month, tomorrow, sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's probably the case. I mean, you're well-heeled. Is that the term? You're doing great, obviously, and you're you have gigs. I'm not going to worry about you too much, but you still have your version of uncertainty and what's happening next year. And, and in that way, I imagine your life's not that different than when you were 22.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's really not.
And it kind of comes back to the Mr. Rogers bit of just and that's okay. And it's it's really a spiritual exercise, the professional creative lifestyle, I think, is a lot of cultivation of this sort of peace within chaos that life actually is, even for people who have maybe the appearances of a more stable, financial situation. I don't know. So you're going to go back home today. Home is in New York now.
Right. Yeah.
And then what's coming up next?
Well, I'm going to be doing some dates with Liz Wright.
Mm-hmm. Duo?
No, with a full band. When she goes out, it's usually her with a 4-piece band. Mm. And I play electric and acoustic. And, we've got kind of a scattered schedule from now till the end of this year. And she's already booking some stuff for next year. I'm going to play some shows with my band where I sing songs. So I kind of have maybe a triple musical life. One is as a side guy, or session guy, and then I make jazz records like this new record that were mentioned. And then I also am a singer-songwriter. And so I have a band. I've had a band since 2006 called the Mint Imperials. Mm. And so we've got some road dates coming up in September.
Largely the same personnel in that band, or
always, yeah,
cool.
Yeah. It's myself and a bass player and a drummer, and it's been the same guys since 2006. Mm. So we've got some road dates coming up, and I'm doing stuff to promote the jazz record. I'm also doing some singer-songwriter shows. I have a new book coming out in October that's based on stuff from my YouTube channel, so educational stuff, but not music theory, more just like think pieces, stuff to think about when you're practicing, when you're on a gig. Just kind of reflections.
That's great. What's it called?
It's called String Theories.
And it will have come out in October of this year.
Yeah.
So it's coming out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like there's no shortage of stuff that's coming up for you. And I would expect nothing else. I think that we're gonna play out with one more song. Great. And this is the part where I say thank you for your time and wisdom, man. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you. I feel like we could do it for a lot longer. And hopefully next time, or sometime, you'll come back and we'll talk more.
Great, Korby. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I put a spell on you. From which you won't recover. If you even think about taking on another lover. A fighter I was born. No one fights to lose. I'll use weapons of the spirit to put a spell on you. Spanish moss and angel wings, and a lock of your hair. I light a crimson candle and say midnight prayer. I put a spell on you. Watch it fade from black to blue. At least I had what I wanted. For a moment or two. Spanish moss and angel wings, and a lock of your hair.
I put a spell on watch it fade, watch it fade, watch it fade from black to blue. At least I had what I wanted. For a moment or two. I put a spell on you.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, click the subscribe button, or you can watch this video right here. Did I do it right? Is that okay? Okay.